guys, it's Cat Lover. Gameplay footage for this video is from FCPlaythroughs, so let's get into our game for today. So, I said a bit ago that I have Metroid brain rot and the feeling still hasn't gone away. Fortunately or unfortunately, I'm not sure. I've stated before that the first Metroid game that was released on the NES wasn't my thing, and that it was way too overwhelming for it being my first Metroid game. I'd never played anything like it, and it didn't make the best first impression for me, but all of that changed once I played Zero Mission. If you weren't aware, Metroid Zero Mission was released on the Game Boy Advance. It was a complete remake of the first official Metroid game. I kind of regret not finishing the first Metroid game before playing this one, because if I go back now, I'm going to be playing it knowing I'll always enjoy Zero Mission more in every single way possible. It'd be a totally unfair matchup. Despite being a remake and being a lot easier on newbies to the series, the game does a lot differently to make it stand out and nearly stand alone just fine by itself, and that's what we'll be discussing today. And now, let's get started. Metroid in itself is a very unique game series. In the mid-80s, it was meant to be a combination of two things, Mario and Zelda but with a twist. Metroid puts a lot of emphasis and focus on exploration, backtracking, and using newfound abilities to progress through the game. It was an unseen kind of thing at this point in time, where usually all you had to do was go in one direction to get past obstacles. Metroid flipped this premise on its head and gave independence to the player, enabling them to do what they saw fit as long as they had the abilities in their arsenal. It was such a new concept that it birthed a new genre called Metroidvania, only being half of the name of course. I wasn't going to compare and contrast too much, but I feel like Zero Mission's ties to the first game is kind of forcing my hand. The first game was a bit rocky in terms of gameplay. It was extremely limiting regarding overall movement and could be frustrating to play. I'm sure it wasn't seen this way when it first came out, but this was almost 40 years ago, and I have to admit that it didn't age well at all. Samus could only aim up, right or left, couldn't crouch, didn't start off with much health. The game often made it impossible to beat it without grinding enemies. You get the point. I wouldn't say the first game is bad by any means, but Zero Mission improves on everything it does, and then some. Instead of feeling like Homelander going against Superman, Samus actually feels great to play as. She can hang off ledges, shoot in many directions off said ledges, can shoot in more than 3 directions in general, can crouch, and looks like a genuine powerhouse. She doesn't look like a scrawny mouse like in the first game. She looks like a real force, an actual one-woman army. She may not have her full arsenal or abilities, but it happens in like every game, so it's nothing new. With more abilities to use, it can make the game feel too easy, which is a general pet peeve a lot of people have about this game. The game is definitely pretty easy by Metroid standards, but trust me, just when I was starting to get cocky, I got my ass kicked by a certain one-eyed freak. Just goes to show that it still has some challenges despite being one of the easier games in the lineup. A lot of bosses and other threats require a wide range of weapons, all of them feeling absolutely amazing to use. You've got the classic Morph Ball, Screw Attack, Ice Beam, Speed Booster, and so much more. What this game did that piqued my interest and also sort of confused me was provide the player with unknown abilities. Throughout the game, you'll find 3 unknown abilities that aren't compatible with Samus' current suit, but after a certain event happens in the story and she receives a new one, you get to find out what these unknown abilities are. The 3 unknown abilities in question are the Plasma Beam, Space Jump, and Gravity Suit, all making Samus more of a demon than she already was. These abilities may take some getting used to though. Only God knows how much time I've spent trying to understand how the Screw Attack worked, but it was just a skill issue. You'll hear about that again in this video, unfortunately. So yeah, the abilities are fun, and due to Zero Mission being so exploration heavy, you can use them to find one of the many missile or health upgrades littered throughout the game. I'm not gonna say it's super easy to get used to, but it's so damn satisfying to perfect a moveset, especially against bosses. Regarding physics and how it generally feels to play the game, Samus falls like a damn brick in this game. After playing any other Metroid game beforehand, it can feel like Samus goes from floating a bit to falling like a 10-pound cement block, but it's nothing you can't get used to. Now, let's run it back and talk more about the missile and health upgrades though. The game is so much easier the more health and missiles you have. Metroid isn't very kind to people who skip too many of them or don't bother exploring to find them in the first place. You'll be able to find a few of these upgrades without too much effort, but after that, you've gotta search for them. Or you gotta lock it on boss fights, that'll make the rules. I know this firsthand because during my first playthrough of the game, I skipped more of these upgrades than I like to admit, and it turned this easy peasy game to a borderline nightmare once you get to certain bosses and other encounters. Either way, Zero Mission doesn't outright force you to do anything but get the abilities to progress, so you can play the game however you'd like. You can make it super easy, or you can make it ungodly difficult, as long as you're having fun, right? Can't be more difficult than Fusion, right? Anyway, this game does well at establishing what a Metroid game is supposed to be. There's a lot of sequence breaking to be had in a lot of Metroid games, including this one. Might be tough to do, and you may have to know a lot about the game and its layout, but it's satisfying for someone who has an itch to scratch. Just a way to make an easy game even easier. It might be on the easier side, it might have so many abilities that I can feel overwhelming, but I love that the game gives you its blessing to mess around and do what you please. That's enough for me. Now we're ready to talk about the level design. Since Zero Mission is a remake of the first Metroid game, it shares all its locations. All the levels are unique in their own way, a far cry from the NES title. Each room is different from the last, and this game has a map, so it's a lot harder to get lost and easier to find where you should go. Instead of depending solely on your gut, the game throws you a bone and makes traversing across levels 100 times more bearable. As you travel throughout the game, more parts of the map will get unlocked, and you'll be able to explore a lot more. To start with the first official quote-unquote level, Brinstar looks fantastic. I love the rendition of its theme in this game, and there's so much more variety in this level while staying true to the original than you'd think. Instead of a dark, soulless background, you get to see much more of the location. This goes for every place you'll be traveling to. The backgrounds are very detailed, with jagged rocks, ancient ruins, and much more, making each level great to just pause and take in the scenery. Despite this, there are some levels that feel awfully claustrophobic and cramped, like Turian. Judging that this is the last location you'd visit in the original Metroid, it's a bit tricky to get through, and by tricky, I mean difficult as hell. Since each level has its own unique enemies, Turian is no exception, but the name of the game is Metroid, and the Metroids show up fashionably late. The level design enables you to run from the Metroids and jump on platforms where it's difficult for them to get to you, but sometimes be trapped in a room with them and the doors won't unlock unless you defeat them all. Turian isn't the first level that's extremely hostile to the player, what with flying onion rings and breadcrumbs of death, but it's where the game turns up the difficulty a notch. The area right before you encounter Mother Brain gets you ready to get majorly screwed over by a million things flying at you and having to maneuver yourself with such a precise, almost pinpoint way while also attacking her with just as much precision. It was infamous in the OG Metroid game, and I've heard a lot of complaints about it here. Even so, there are other levels of note, such as Kraid's Lair. I remember hearing the music for his lair for the first time, putting my Steam Deck down, and adding the song to my YouTube playlist. The game really knocks it out of the park with the scenery, atmosphere, and aesthetic. You can go from something generally safe to something super dangerous, like the Space Pirates mothership. Not to dive too much into the story just yet, but this level is somewhere where you're very vulnerable, taking place just after you lost your suit. There are many places to hide on the mothership, as there's not much to do but paralyze and run away. It almost becomes a stealth game, with segments where you'll be hanging off ledges while avoiding spotlights and seeking out dark corners after running from space pirates. It's like a game of hide and seek, and can have moments where you're bound to be found, but I really like this part of Zero Mission, even if it didn't perfectly fit in with the rest of the game. Each level provides different kinds of hazards and obstacles to the player. Lava you'll have to dive into, walls you have to bomb, areas you have to thoroughly comb through, and much more. The level design looks beautiful for a Game Boy Advance game and plays just as gorgeously even when it's frustrating. But there's a reason why you are where you are, and that's when we segue into the story. Metroid games usually have the story take a back seat, and a lot of the time it's for the best. The story still isn't the main focus, but for what it's worth, I like how it's presented in this game. Keeps the general premise that Samus arrives on Zebes to eliminate the threat that is Mother Brain and her space pirate lackeys and prevent them from using Metroids to take over the galaxy. Samus defeats Kraid and Ridley and opens up a path to Torian where she'll find Mother Brain. Mother Brain puts up a fight, but not a good enough one, and sets up a self-destruct sequence. You get out just fine, and that's where the original game ends. This might be very simple storytelling, so it might be a surprise to hear that I actually really like it. Showing rather than telling is something that can be done well if the right amount of effort and consideration is put in. Zero Mission takes so many things about the original story and makes it so much more heart-racing and cinematic. You even get to see the Metroids establish that they have no master and act on instinct, like when they kill a bunch of space pirates and leave their lifeless bodies for Samus to find. It may just be a cutscene showing off Metroid capabilities, but I think it presents to the player that Metroids aren't evil, nor do they have the desire to conquer the galaxy. They're more like animals than anything, doing what they're designed to do and nothing more. I wonder if that'll come into play eventually. Either way, they keep the simple plot of the original game and build on it, though some of it may have been established off-screen and may be confusing for newer players. We'll get into that later, though. As for what takes place after escaping the explosion, Samus takes off her suit thinking she's safe to relax, but soon realizes she's surrounded by space pirates. After being chased for a bit, they shoot down her ship and she crash lands back on Zebes, but without her power suit and no weapons except for a paralyzer. Let me say right now, this shit is basically useless. She has no ship and no way off the planet, but she spots a space pirate mothership and makes the desperate decision to go in and steal one of their ships. She's chased around for quite a bit, narrowly escaping death each time she's found, but eventually she comes across an ancient mural where she must prove herself worthy enough to receive a suit with full capabilities and then some. This part of the game confused me a bit, but now I was able to light up any space pirates I saw, so it was a welcome upgrade. Afterwards, Samus kicks some space pirate ass, though she does get halted by a robotic version of Ridley created in his image. She kicks his ass too, and proceeds to quickly leave as another self-destruct sequence is initiated. Congrats, the day is saved as Samus leaves safe and sound. But like I said before, some things you'll see in this game might confuse you a bit if you're able to notice it at all. This is because Zero Mission has ties to the Metroid manga only released in Japan, published right before the game came out. It focuses on Samus's journey, her experience in her past, how she became a bounty hunter and all that. All of it is fine if it's her character or what's established of it anyway. If you didn't read it before playing Zero Mission, you'll just feel a little left out in regards to the story, but nothing too serious. There is one thing I really don't like about how it portrays Ridley though. I will say that I don't like the role Ridley played in Samus's early life. Seems like a tool used to go, oh, they're mortal enemies and will always encounter each other, but like, is that really necessary? The whole point of Metroid is that it's not like Mario or Zelda. Having a super iconic villain that appears basically in every game to cause chaos and destruction isn't a Metroid thing to do. I'd say he's not smart, as he very much is with the amount of resources he has, but I'm just pointing out that he wouldn't use psychological warfare, he would just fight, like in the games. I'm also not a fan of how the game basically admits that Samus's parents were killed in Ridley's attack on her home planet. It makes the encounter between Samus and Ridley seem way too personal when there's no trace of that anywhere but in Other M, and I just consider it to be a contrived plot device to add in more lore for Samus and is not at all necessary. Alright, enough nitpicking. Other than that, I thought the game was super sweet. Maybe a little or a lot confusing if you didn't read the manga, but super sweet either way. Samus being raised by the Chozos makes sense as to why she has a connection to their statues and is able to interact with them. It maybe kills the ancient mystery surrounding them, but I don't mind this change nearly as much as the Ridley stuff. I actually think it adds more depth to Samus's character without it seeming too out of left field too. And I guess space pirates destroying her home made it even more satisfying to finally wipe most of them out. Alright, enough of the opinion piece though, no one asked for that. The story of Zero Mission takes things from the original and improves on them, making them miles better. Maybe it wasn't too easy to understand everything due to its ties to the manga, but regardless, I think it created something unforgettable. Now let's dive into the bosses. Since Zero Mission is mostly easy, most of the bosses in this game are pretty much a cakewalk. Mother Brain, Kraid, and Ridley are a given considering that they were in the original Metroid, but we have a few new bosses here introduced in this game. Most of the newer bosses are easy, and even the ones that seem difficult aren't after getting the pattern down. Even so, the newer bosses really feel unique, and I can't say I've seen anything like that in a Metroid game before. For example, fighting the Kirugiru involves you attacking the vines, eating away at a larva, and using a freezable turtle to get your way up there. Afterwards, you fight that same larva you saved after it turns into a wasp-like creature, and I'm not the biggest fan of them, so we make quick work of that. I really like how the game has unique bosses that may or may not show up again later. It shows that your actions have consequences, and the things that you do here that disrupt the food chain can cause you or someone else pain down the road. Well, I wonder where I've heard that from before. Okay, I'll stop now. Even the bosses that don't have much going on are thought-provoking in a way. Another example being using ziplines to manipulate a boss or using abilities to avoid projectile-based attacks. This game makes it fun to mess around with bosses and do what feels right, or conjure up a new, possibly unintended way to beat them. The more major bosses are just like their NES counterparts with a lot more to offer since it was released in 2004. Kraid is relatively easy, so long as you use his deadly belly button lid to climb up to him and shoot him in the mouth. Of course you have to get his mouth open first, but this won't be the last time you see a Kraid boss fight like this. Ridley is a boss I had some trouble with, but that was honestly just a skill issue on my part. Like Kraid, Ridley is pretty easy to defeat. All he does is really just shoot fireballs at you, and though he can grab you and do massive damage like what happened to me 3 times, you can easily avoid it. Dodging or shooting the fireballs is the way to go, and he doesn't really do much else but fly around if he can't grab you. Lame ass. After beating both of them, you unlock access to Torian, and now you can do what you sought out to do. Stop Mother Brain once and for all. She's honestly where things stop being so simple. As you make your way through Torian, you'll encounter a lot of Metroids before you actually get to her. The Metroids aren't as scary as they were in the NES title, but they're just as intimidating here. Using the Ice Beam here is imperative, since they can't be harmed unless frozen first. Even after being frozen, it'll take a few missiles to take them down, so it's best not to get cornered as they don't stay frozen forever. The atmosphere, lighting, and the way the Metroids come into view from the background is nightmare fuel. Killing them isn't difficult, since Mother Brain is enough to make the game go from fairly easy to decently difficult. I'm being dramatic, sure, but even while playing on an emulator, I would always make myself restart the entire room so I could get the authentic experience. It wasn't too fun, I'll tell you. The entire room is against you, the rings, the beams, the lava, and the small platforms you need to stand on, and even Mother Brain attacks you rather than just sit idly by this time around. There's so much to focus on that it feels overwhelming and frustrating, and though you can get further each time to take a shot at her, you might be stuck for a while. I can't imagine having to deal with Mother Brain at the same time as the Metroids. Talk about a total nightmare. But not to fear, the room Mother Brain is in is enough to make you want to blow your brains out. As I stated in the story section, this isn't the end of Zero Mission, and there are new bosses to talk about. While on the space pirate ship, in order to get a new and improved suit, you have to fight, I use those words very lightly, a vision of yourself in an orb. You can't hit the vision of yourself without taking damage, but you can hit the orb once it's solid, and pieces will begin to fly into the empty spots on the mural on the wall. After completing what I believe is a test of will, you'll receive a new suit, and you'll be ready to fight the next boss. Yeah, with this suit, the meta really boss becomes a lot easier than it should be. All you need are some well-timed jumps to avoid attacks and coming into contact with his body. I'll say the only hard part about this boss is the limited space, but like I said, he goes down fast. It's a bit disappointing since he's supposed to be the final boss of the game, but he's just a robotic version of Ridley, and the OG wasn't even that hard, so yeah, I guess that checks out. I just wish the bosses could have been a bit harder, but for the 100th time, Mother Brain got that covered. I do love that each boss is unique, and that they added some that weren't available in the original Metroid. It really helps the game stand by itself, so despite being a remake, the returning bosses are still very unique. Now we're ready to talk about the art and animation for this game. Game Boy Advance games have some of the most beautiful sprite work I've ever seen. Metroid is one of those games. From the cutscenes to the in-game models, everything looks as detailed as it can be. It's really amazing what they could do on such limiting hardware, and it can make you forget that it's released on an aged handheld console. There's a lot of effort put into how things look, and I couldn't be more pleased with the animation. It really assists in setting Zero Mission apart from any other Metroid game, especially the one it's a remake of. Of course, Metroid has had some time in the oven since 1986, with the overall quality of the art changing throughout the years. I've said it before, but I can't stress how much better Samus looks here than the OG game. The suit she has here, alongside the sprite work, only make her look more intimidating and confident. Even outside of her suit, she gets a very clear change from how she was in the older Metroid titles. This was the first appearance of her Zero suit, something a lot of fans love. I like it a lot too, probably for different reasons. The baby blue color fits well with her look, and the suit nearly being a full body one also meshes well with her personality. Zero Mission really embraces Samus's feminine side here, and I couldn't be happier about it. The contrast between her and her suit and her outside of her suit is what I'm a fan of. Even while saving the world, she still has time to do her makeup and tie up her hair, and I can barely get out of bed. Okay, I've made that joke already in my other Metroid video. Everything in Zero Mission looks gorgeous, and I remember being in awe how pretty everything looked. Despite the game coming out 2 decades ago, it still looks fantastic. Now with that being said, let's wrap it up. Comparing Zero Mission to the original, like I said, is wildly unfair. I mean, you put the two side by side and most people will probably look at you in disbelief. Zero Mission really improved on everything the original sought out to do and even added some of its own charm into the game. Playing this game was a joy and I hadn't expected to enjoy it as much as I did. It might have been the easiest Metroid game I've finished so far, but it was still thrilling and had a lot to offer in terms of exploration and secrets, you know, typical Metroid stuff. It was a great game and a great remake, so yeah, I guess you could say I really liked this game. A normal amount, of course. I've only finished 4 Metroid games at the time of recording the script. Fusion, Dread, Samus Returns, and this one, Zero Mission. I've only just started Prime 1, and I'm about halfway done with Super Metroid. All are different in their own ways, but I still find myself loving them because, well, they're Metroid. Zero Mission was the first Metroid game I played after about a year and a half of taking a break from the series, and it was like taking a dip in a pool on a hot day. Really cold, freezing even, but great once you get comfortable. It may not be my favorite Metroid game thus far, but it holds a dear place in my heart for taking it easy on me when I was relearning how Metroid games worked, especially since I'd only played the kinda linear Fusion. Still, I gotta say, this game made me so happy to be getting back into Metroid, and I'll always appreciate it for doing that for me. What do you think about the game or this video? I'd love to see your thoughts in the comments. You already know how I feel about Metroid. I like it, a normal amount, I promise. Make sure to like and subscribe, yada yada yada. I'm Cat Lover, I'll see you around. Peace!